We are live. We are back together. I hope the end of your Passover, Pesach, was meaningful. Your Mashiach Suda, festive meal of Mashiach, the future festival of the future. I hope that went well. Here, thank God, it was wonderful. It was beautiful, very meaningful, and inspiring. Inspiring. A day that's infused with a very special energy, a special light of the times of Mashiach. And to tune into that is beautiful. It's beautiful. Welcome to Tanya today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kedoshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. I have spring allergies. Spring has sprung its allergies upon me. Excuse me. We continue in chapter 42, speaking about the Moses in us. There's a Moses in us, a Moshe Rabbeinu, a Moses in us, and then there's a Moses in every generation, a leader, a Jewish leader that incorporates all the souls of the Jewish people and beyond, actually, and is the inspiration for them. For what? What's the inspiration? Well, Moshe Rabbeinu, one of the 7 shepherds of the Jewish people, a shepherd takes care of the flock, feeds the flock. So each of the shepherds, they fed something to the Jewish people, to the Jewish soul. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, fed das, awareness. Awareness of God. Awareness of God's true reality. Before you can get to appreciate that awareness, we have to allow our soul to be able to emerge. And that's by not giving the animal and the body its preference. If it gets its preference, it just wants to have pleasure. It just wants to fulfill its needs. That's what it wants. So we can't allow that. That's the first thing. The second thing is then to dig deep inside of ourselves, to allow one of 2 ways that God's an awareness of God, of God's presence. One is that we meditate enough that it actually brings some palpable feeling in the heart. Another is just to make it that our soul that has that natural property of connectivity to the divine, that it should be revealed. And that's going to take time and effort. It's not something that comes naturally. Excuse me, again. We have to labor for it. As our sages say, Yagaitu Matsasi, tell me that if a person worked hard for something and achieved, believe. Like a person who knows that they have a treasure in their backyard. gold that's in your backyard. What are you going to do? You're going to dig and dig a lot, dig deep, dig all around. You know for a certainty there's gold. You're going to look for it. Well, believe it or not, folks, we have a treasure buried in our soul, and that is an awareness of the divine, a connection to the divine. It's definitely in our heart that transcends time and space. And yet, digging for it deep within ourselves, we'll be able to find it. We'll truly be able to find it in a manner that awareness will lead me to turn away from evil and do good. Not allow negativity to control me, not in thought, speech, or action, because we know that God is seeing what we're doing. He hears and listens and perceives to all our deeds, searches inside of us. Are we honest about it? As the sages say in Pirkei Avos, the ethics of the fathers, reflect upon three things, and you won't come to do a sin. Know what is above you. What's above you? An eye that sees, an ear that hears. Now, of course, God has no physical form, right? So what does it mean? Why do we say that he sees? Well, seeing doesn't just mean with your eye. You can, when someone says something, you say, oh, I see what you're saying. You see? How do you see it? Because you see it in your mind's eye. We have a medium that allows our sight, minimum sight, our eyes. God doesn't have the construct of a physical being, and therefore his sight is limited. Doesn't have physical limitations. And therefore, when we say that God sees, of course, it means without an eye. It means without any physical form, or for that matter, what we would perceive spiritual form. Of course, we use that term because that's what we know, right? That's what we know. But to take this a step further by way of illustration, God, when he sees and knows, is not as we see and know something, even if we were able to see in the mind's eye across the world, and there would be no building that would obstruct our sight. There would be nothing that would obstruct our sight. In the end, we're seeing something outside of us. God, on the other hand, his seeing, his knowing, his awareness is a part of him. It's not outside of him. Metaphorically, let's take this metaphor, which will not be a complete, full metaphor, but for example, we feel it's cold or warm or hot. How do we know that? Oh, because I'm feeling it inside of me. It's not because I looked at the thermometer, the thermostat, and I can say, oh, it's cold. I feel it. It's within me. So likewise, God knows me and knows you and knows everything. Nothing can be hidden from him, because really what he's doing is knowing himself. He's knowing himself. As Maimonides speaks about this idea, which all the Kabbalistic scholars agree with, that God is the knower, the known, and the known, the knower, the knowledge, and the known all at once. By us, it's three separate things. My soul is the knower. My brain is the knowledge, the tool of knowledge, right? And then there's the known. 2 + 2 = 4. Or that, I know that I'm now speaking, in chapter 42 of Tanya. There's three separate things. By God Almighty, they're one and the same. So when he's knowing himself. By knowing himself, he knows me. And he knows everything within creation. Now, the difference is between my self-awareness, that if I got hurt in my finger or it's cold and I feel it inside of the coldness, it's not something outside of me. It's within me, the awareness of something that happened to me, to my finger. The difference is it's affecting me. If it's cold, that affects me. If it's hot, that affects me. If I got hurt on my finger, that affects me. God's awareness, his knowledge, his knowing of himself is not affecting him. It's not changing him. That's a simple testament of faith that God, before he created the world, was one and only, and the only reality, the only thing. After he creates the world, God is one and only, not just only one God. He's one and the only thing. There's no other thing. So again, by us, it's not that way. It's a breakdown in the metaphor. But this is a very fundamental, basic belief, as all Jews, descendants of the patriarchs, believe in God, believers, descendants of believers, without any speculation that you were the same before you created the world as you are after you created the world. Right? So this awareness of the truth of God, on how he sees me right now, and he sees me at all times. If I were to think about this for a period of time, each person according to their capacity, if I were to think about this, ponder it, how God is truly omnipresent. His glory fills the world. He's looking and sees me. And not just sees what I'm doing, but knows on the inside. Do I mean it? We may not be so aware, do we mean it or not? But God knows. Right? When we will think about this will implant what we call a fear of God. A fear of God means the presence of God, not fear of punishment, but the fear of God's presence, that he sees and knows everything. And what that is meant to do through meditating upon this notion is to just change our behavior. Behavior is our actions, of course, our words, and our willful, cogitated thought. Turn away from evil and do good, and not rebel against Hashem. And this is what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, we had learned about previously, who was the leader of the Jewish people at the time of the destruction of the Second Holy Temple by the Romans, on his deathbed, he said to his students, what did he say? That you should, so be it that the fear of God should be upon you to keep you from sinning, like the fear a person has of a human being. And they weren't too pleased with that, but he said, no, that's a very lofty level. Because when a person does something wrong, they look this way and that way to make sure no one's looking. That's when you're at least somewhat refined. When you're not refined at all, then you don't do that. But if you're a decent person, and something inside of you tells you it's not so good what you're doing, you don't want anybody to see. So when we know that God is seeing, that is the fear of the presence of God that will lead us to a changed behavior. And with this, then, we can also understand the verse that we began this chapter with, chapter 42. What does God want from us? Moses speaks to the Jewish people. What does God want from you? Only to fear him. Talmud says, well, that's not a simple thing. What does the Talmud respond? Yeah, for Moses it is. Yeah, but we're speaking about every person. So he explained, because every person has a piece of Moses in them, piece of Moshe Rabbeinu in them. What piece do we have? That piece of das, awareness, awareness of the divine, awareness of God. We have a piece of that in us that when we think about, meditate upon, ponder what we just spoke about, and at some length, that it develops a true sense, of the truth of the teachings, and we sense it in our being. We sense the vitality of that teachings in such a way. God is present in a manner that changes my behavior. Right? That we reach that faculty in our soul that has the awareness of God, that we want to be connected to God and not disconnected. That's the hidden treasure of fear that we have in our soul, that we have in our hearts, that takes effort to bring it out and reveal it. A lot there today. Well, triple header, I guess. Any questions, any comments? Welcome everybody back. Hope everybody had a wonderful Pesach, end of Pesach celebration, Mashiach Suda, the light of Mashiach. Well, these are the teachings of the light of Mashiach. Many people learning for the sake of as a hostage, for their merit, which is beautiful. Oh, my sister is even joining us. Leora, thank you for joining. Okay, I don't see any questions. No. Thank you, Jeff. Oh, Konya has a question. Should fear of God come before love of God? Yes, that was chapter 41. Right? We said the beginning, the core, and the root of all service, divine service, is the fear of God. And again, every time I say the word fear of God, I think that someone's, you know, I think of someone that's new that hasn't been in the class before, and they're taken aback because it's so not PC to speak about fear and not love. But again, the fear we're talking about here is a very profound one that is not simple to have. The fear of the presence of God. We know what it means when someone that we respect and we're in their presence, right? That we act differently. Even the way we eat in the presence of certain people, like people we're very familiar with, how do we eat? You know, we know, I know. But when you're in the presence of a more lofty individual, you eat differently. Why? It's called fear. Now, of course, it could be fear that you don't want them to think badly of you. You don't want them to make a comment, of the way you're eating. Or you might, get a nasty remark. So yes, those are, very primordial kind of sense of fear. We're not talking about that. That's a lower level. The fear is of just the presence, that itself, intuitively, instinctually, someone that you respect and they're present, you talk differently. You act differently. So if God is present, and for us, that God should be present, that we should talk and act differently, and it leads to that, is only because we're going to be very mindful. And here the Alter Rebbe is speaking about how we are not just mindful, but actually meditate upon this in order to create this sense in us, this awareness in us of what it means that God is, as we went into actually into finer detail of this idea, and that it's going to mold and shape us and make us different. Yeah, this is the beginning. Next chapter, we will speak about love. After, Davida, someone told me that the only part of the neshama comes into this world, only part of the neshama, the rest, the heavenly realms. When we do a mitzvah in this world, we can feel the happiness it brings to the rest of the neshama. And everyone else, is that true? Tuesday. Um, yes and no. No, we have higher parts of the neshama that we may not access, and lower parts that we do access more, but they're all accessible. We just, when we live more of a material body life, so then you're accessing merely nefesh. When you access your your feelings, and there's feelings from the animal soul, but talking about here the godly, divine soul, to access those feelings. No, we may not be using it that much. Neshama is using the mind to access the divine through the mind. That's neshama level. Chaya is the will, the divine will that's in my soul. And then Yechida is the core essence. But more on that another time. Okay. Beautiful. All right, folks. Okay. Thank you, Clem, for your comment. Ida, and everybody. Wonderful to be back. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich and Kadesh, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and pleasure to share with you the Tanya. An amazing, beautiful day.